So I'm going to do a video today, but unfortunately it's a little bit of a sad video. I just heard a couple days ago that Dr. Brad Cox, who's one of the men credited with inventing Objective-C, passed away this month. I just heard about this a couple days ago, but apparently he passed away at the beginning of the month. But he had a very important contribution in that he was really the lead inventor for Objective-C. And if you're not familiar with Objective-C, Objective-C for the longest time was the primary programming language that was used on the Next Step computers, and then eventually Mac OS X when Apple acquired Next, and then eventually on the iPhone, a lot of the key infrastructure and the whole Apple ecosystem was built on top of Objective-C. And so I wanted to do a quick video to kind of talk about his contributions and why they're so important. So what's interesting is that Brad was working at a company called ITT. He didn't have a degree in computer science. This is really before degrees in computer science were mainstream. He did have a PhD in mathematical biology, so extremely smart man. And he got involved in computing and stuff while I think he was at the University of Chicago. And he'd done some consulting and stuff for a while, and then wound up getting hired at ITT, which was kind of like the international version of AT&T at the time. And so they were doing a lot of experimental stuff with computers. And one of the things they were looking at was adopting Unix, similar to how AT&T had built Unix. And the primary programming language at the time for writing applications on Unix was the C programming language. And C, in of itself, is not an object-oriented programming language. And one of the things that happened about this same time, around the year 1982, was that there was an article that came out about Smalltalk in Byte magazine, and Brad had read that article and said, "Well, this would be a good idea for what we're trying to do with computing here at ITT." And so he developed a preprocessor. Essentially, what that would do is allow you to write code in, let's say, an Objective-C syntax. It's really just an object syntax that runs on top of a traditional C programming language. And so what this preprocessor would do is essentially just take the Objective-C part and convert it into C, and then it could just be compiled into assembly from that point. So they played around with that, and then eventually another gentleman, the one who had hired him at ITT, decided to start a new company. That gentleman is named Tom Love. They started a company called PPI, which eventually changed their name to Stepstone, and that's how they eventually started making and marketing Objective-C, along with something that were called IC packs, which were these packages of pre-written objects that you could use to build applications a lot quicker than what you normally would do. And in the time as they were, beginning to build and grow the company, they hired an engineer by the name of Steve Nareff. And Steve really kind of came in and, built a much more robust compiler architecture. And so much so that they at Next, they had decided they were going to use Objective-C because it allowed them to do stuff. They wanted to use object-oriented programming as well. And apparently, the story I heard was that Steve Jobs was not very happy with the quality of the compiler that was coming from Stepstone. And Steve Nareff, who'd come to, I believe, Next a couple of times, to try to kind of work out, what were some of the problems they were having. Eventually, he was hired by Next and wound up going to work at Next. And he took the work that he'd been doing at Stepstone, and they wound up basically building it into the GCC compiler, which is an open source compiler framework. But what's interesting is that a lot of the stuff that Stepstone was trying to do with these object packs is exactly what Next started doing with the Next Step operating system. They basically built these essentially these libraries of already created objects that you could use to build your applications upon. And that's really important because if you look at most modern, platforms that you're going to be programming for, there's already all this stuff that's already pre-built. So one of the examples they used to give at Next was that, let's say you wanted to build a web browser. Well, we already have this web view component that you can use as a basis for. So you basically just point that thing towards a URL. It will render the website inside of this web view. Boom, you have your application, and you can do it very little code. And that was one of the things I think that was a brilliant idea with what Stepstone was trying to do. Apple, actually incorporated it into what they were doing. When they bought Next was already doing this, and Apple's incorporated this into the work that they're doing. And by the time that the new platforms like iOS came out, as an example, UIKit essentially it's just a library of all these different pre-written objects that you can use to build your applications on top of. It makes it much easier to write applications. So a bunch of other companies started following this. Sun Microsystems with Java. Java is a language, but it's also a runtime, and there's also all these libraries that you can use to build your applications off of. Microsoft did the same thing with .NET. And the thing that's really neat about Java and .NET is that it's all based off of object-oriented programming languages. You don't have to use object-oriented programming languages, but if you are, you can take advantage of all this stuff, all these different objects that are already pre-built. So one of the things I'm going to recommend here is there's a book. It looks like this is the print version. I don't know if there is a online version or not. Let me show you the book here. See, looks like there's one copy here on Amazon. This is a book that Brad Cox wrote about object-oriented programming, and I don't think this is going to be in circulation for very much longer. But what's even more interesting is a number of years ago with the Computer History Museum, Hanson Su did a series of interviews with all these people, including Steve Nareff and Brad Cox, on the originations of Objective-C and what their dealings were with these different companies and stuff like that, and some of the history behind that. It's very interesting. So there's a really nice 3-hour interview here with Brad Cox. If you're interested in the work that he did, I would highly recommend watching this interview with him, as well as the one with Steve Nareff. But I just want to bring it up because Brad was really one of the pioneers in computer science over the last several decades, and I was really sad to hear about his passing. But with that said, please let me know what you think. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down, but give it a thumbs up. And if you like content from this channel, I do a lot of stuff on Objective-C on this channel, so please subscribe if you would like to find out more. With that, have a nice day.